The snow falling on the streets of Boston was thick enough to bury sound, but it couldn't silence the vibration of the smartwatch left on the bathroom vanity. Ethan stood in the doorway, towel in hand, staring at the glowing screen that displayed a message from a number saved only as M. A single letter that was about to erase his entire life. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a corporate takeover of his heart, orchestrated by the woman who had promised to protect it. If you've ever wondered what happens when a quiet man is pushed past his breaking point, don't click away. The most dangerous storms are the ones you never hear coming until they tear the roof off. The silence in the Boston brownstone was heavy, pressed down by the weight of the blizzard raging outside. Inside, the only light came from the triple monitor set up on the oak desk where Ethan Vance sat, his eyes scanning lines of code that blurred into a cascade of neon green and white. Ethan rubbed his temples. He was 32, but tonight he felt 50. As the lead architect for genetic systems, he carried the weight of the company's upcoming AI launch on his shoulders. He hadn't slept properly in 3 days. "Daddy, is Mom home yet?" Ethan spun his chair around. Leo, his 4-year-old son, stood in the hallway clutching a nebulizer mask like a teddy bear. His breathing was wheezy. The cold winter air always triggered his asthma. "Not yet, bud," Ethan said, his voice instantly softening. He walked over, picked Leo up, and carried him back to the bedroom. "She's at that big dinner, remember? The one for the investors. She's working hard for us." "She's always working," Leo whispered, climbing back under the covers. "I know. Me too. But once this launch is over, we're going to the cabin. Just you, me, and Mom. Promise." Ethan kissed Leo's forehead, waited until the boy's breathing steadied, and then walked back to the living room. The clock struck 1 a.m. The front door unlocked with a sharp click. Clara stumbled in, shaking snow off her cashmere coat. She looked breathtaking in an emerald evening gown that hugged her curves, but her eyes were glassy, and her lipstick was slightly smudged at the corner. "Ethan," she said, startled to see him standing there. "Why are you still up? You look like a zombie." "Waiting for you," Ethan said, walking over to help her with her coat. As he pulled the heavy fabric from her shoulders, a scent hit him. It wasn't her usual lavender perfume. It was musk, expensive cigar smoke, and the faint, coppery tang of scotch. Ethan didn't smoke, and he certainly didn't drink scotch. "How was the gala?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral, hanging the coat up. "Exhausting," Clara sighed, kicking off her heels. She walked past him toward the bathroom, avoiding his gaze. Marcus Hale gave a speech that lasted an hour. Boring corporate stuff. "I need a shower." Ethan watched her go. Marcus Hale, the CEO of Hale Pharmaceuticals, their biggest competitor. Why was Clara at a gala with him? She had said it was an internal genetics event. A small buzz vibrated on the marble kitchen island. Clara had left her Apple Watch charging on the stand earlier, but it had synced with her phone, which was currently in her purse. The screen lit up with a preview of a new message. He doesn't suspect anything? The transfer needs to happen tonight, Clara. I want the code and the kid secured before the merger. Ethan stared at the tiny screen. The words didn't make sense at first. The code, the kid. His heart began to hammer against his ribs, a frantic, irregular rhythm. He looked at the bathroom door. The water was running. He picked up the watch. He knew her passcode. It was Leo's birthday. His fingers trembled as he typed it in. The message thread opened, revealing months of conversation. December 10th. He's pathetic, Marcus. He works all night on that algorithm and doesn't even realize I'm gone. December 15th. Don't worry about custody. My lawyer says we can paint him as unstable, overworked, paranoid. The court will give Leo to me. Tonight, 9:30 p.m. I love it when you look at me like that in public. Soon we won't have to hide. Ethan set the watch back down precisely where it had been. His hands were ice cold. The code he had been writing, the revolutionary healthcare AI meant to save lives. She wasn't just cheating on him physically. She was selling his soul, his life's work, and planning to steal the only thing that mattered more than any of it. His son. The water in the bathroom stopped. "Ethan?" Clara called out, her voice muffled by the door. "Can you bring me a towel? I forgot one." Ethan stood in the dim light of the kitchen. He looked at the family photo on the fridge, the three of them smiling in happier times. He felt something fracture inside him, a clean, sharp break. The tired, overworked husband died in that moment. He walked to the linen closet, grabbed a towel, and moved toward the bathroom. His face was a mask of calm, but his mind was already running a new script, one where he wasn't the victim, but the architect of a collapse she would never see coming. "Coming, honey," he said. Ethan handed Clara the towel through the crack in the bathroom door. She murmured a thank you, the steam escaping into the chilly hallway like a ghost. He waited until he heard the lock click and the hairdryer start up before he moved. He didn't go to bed. He went straight to his workstation. His hands, usually steady when typing complex algorithms, hovered over the keyboard for a fraction of a second. Then muscle memory took over. He wasn't looking for porn or hotel receipts. He was looking for digital footprints. If Clara was sending code to Marcus Hale, she had to move terabytes of data. He bypassed the standard user interface and dove straight into the command line of his home server, which mirrored his work terminal. The black screen filled with cascading white text. Access log. User Cvance initiated transfer via port 8080. 11:42 p.m. Destination IP. Masked. Routing through. Hail Pharma_secure_VPN. Ethan felt the breath leave his lungs. It was there, staring him in the face. While he had been reading bedtime stories to Leo about brave knights and dragons, his wife had been downstairs, disabling his firewalls and uploading the core kernel of the neural network he had spent 3 years building. She hadn't just opened the door for Marcus. She had given him the keys to the kingdom. He quickly inserted an encrypted flash drive, copying the logs. It was a reflex, back up everything. He needed proof not just of the affair, but of the corporate espionage. "You're still working?" The voice cut through the hum of the hard drives. Ethan didn't jump. He slowly spun his chair around. Clara stood in the doorway of his office. She was wearing a silk robe he had bought her for her birthday, her hair perfectly dried, her face scrubbed clean of makeup. She looked innocent, almost like the woman he had married 5 years ago. Almost. "I'm not working," Ethan said, his voice dangerously low. "I'm looking at the transfer logs, Clara." Clara's expression didn't shift. She didn't gasp. She didn't pale. She simply leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms over her chest. The look she gave him was one of mild annoyance, as if he had caught her eating the last slice of cake rather than destroying their life. "You always were too smart for your own good, Ethan," she said. Her tone was flat, devoid of the panic he expected. "You gave Marcus the kernel," Ethan said, standing up. "That's federal theft. That's prison time. That's business," she corrected him, walking into the room. She ran a finger along the edge of his desk, looking at the monitors. "Marcus is going to change the world with that tech. You were just going to let it sit in testing for another 2 years because you're too afraid of ethical variables." "Marcus isn't afraid. He's a shark," Ethan snapped. "And you're sleeping with him." Clara finally looked him in the eye. The coldness in her gaze was absolute. It was the look of someone who had justified her actions long ago. "I'm securing a future, Ethan. A real future. Not this." She gestured vaguely at his cluttered desk, at the small brownstone that Ethan was so proud of. "You're a brilliant coder, but you're a small man. You think small. Marcus thinks big. And he appreciates what I bring to the table." "You're talking about our family like it's a merger," Ethan said, stepping closer. "What about Leo? You think Marcus gives a damn about a kid with asthma? Leo needs a father who is a winner." Clara said, her voice sharpening. Not a man who hides in a dark room staring at screens while the world passes him by. And don't think about going to the board, Ethan. Marcus owns 51% as of this morning. You're already out. The only question is whether you want to walk away quietly or be dragged out. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and realized the woman he loved didn't exist. She was a construct, a beautiful interface hiding a malicious code. I'm not letting you take Leo, he said. Clara smiled, a thin, pitying thing. Oh, Ethan, you really don't understand how this works, do you? I have the lawyers. I have the narrative. You're the unstable, overworked genius who snapped. By the time I'm done, you'll be lucky if the judge lets you see Leo on Christmas. She turned and walked out of the room, leaving the scent of her expensive lotion lingering in the air. Ethan stood alone in the glow of the monitors, the evidence on his drive feeling suddenly insignificant against the weight of her confidence. She had planned this down to the last line of code. But code could be rewritten. The morning sun reflected blindingly off the glass facade of the Genetic Systems building, but it offered no warmth. Ethan stood before the security turnstiles, his breath misting in the frigid air. He swiped his badge. Beep. Red light. He swiped again, harder this time. Beep. Red light. System glitch, Ethan muttered, mostly to himself. He looked up at the security station. Jerry, a guard Ethan had exchanged pleasantries with for 5 years. A man whose daughter's Girl Scout cookies Ethan bought by the box, refused to meet his eyes. Jerry, buzz me in. The reader is down, Ethan called out, his voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged lobby. Jerry finally looked up. His face was a mask of professional discomfort. I can't do that, Mr. Vance. Your credentials have been revoked. Ethan felt a cold prickle at the base of his neck. Revoked? By whom? I'm the lead architect. I built the security protocol you're staring at. By the new board of directors. A smooth, baritone voice answered from behind him. Ethan turned. Stepping out of the executive elevator was Marcus Hale. He looked every inch the titan of industry. Charcoal bespoke suit, polished Oxfords, and a smile that didn't reach his predatory eyes. Beside him was the head of Genetics Legal, a woman who had once praised Ethan's loyalty. Marcus, Ethan said, the name tasting like ash. You don't work here. I do as of this morning, Marcus replied, stopping just out of reach. He didn't offer a hand. Hale Pharmaceuticals has acquired a controlling interest in genetics, and our first order of business was trimming the unstable elements. The legal head stepped forward, thrusting a thick envelope toward Ethan. Mr. Vance, you are being terminated for cause, effective immediately. Gross misconduct, breach of confidentiality, and attempted data theft. Theft! Ethan laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. Clara gave you the source code. I have the logs. We have logs too, Marcus said softly, stepping closer so only Ethan could hear. We have logs of you accessing the secure server at 1 a.m. last night from your personal terminal. Unauthorized access. Downloading proprietary kernels to an unencrypted drive. It looks like you were planning to sell to the highest bidder. Ethan froze. The flash drive, the backup he had made to protect himself. They had anticipated it. They had baited him into stealing his own work so they could frame him for it. You won't get away with this, Ethan whispered. I already have, Marcus replied, checking his watch. Now, please leave the premises, or Jerry will have to escort you out. And Ethan, you might want to hurry home. I believe the police are executing a warrant for that drive right now. The drive. It was in his pocket. But he knew, with a sickening certainty, that they wouldn't need what was in his pocket. They would have planted enough evidence at his house to bury him 10 times over. Ethan didn't wait. He turned and ran. The drive back to the brownstone was a blur of honking horns and run red lights. Panic was a cold hand squeezing his throat. Leo. When he turned onto his street, the flashing blue lights confirmed his worst fears. 2 police cruisers were parked haphazardly on the snow-covered curb. His front door was wide open. Ethan slammed his car into park and sprinted across the lawn. Leo, a uniformed officer, intercepted him on the porch, blocking his path with a heavy arm. "Sir, stay back. This is a crime scene." "That's my house. Where is my son?" Ethan shouted, trying to shove past. "Ethan, stop." Clara's voice came from the driveway. She was standing by her car, holding Leo. She was crying, perfect, cinematic tears that glistened on her cheeks. She looked terrified, not of the police, but of him. "Officer, keep him away," Clara sobbed, clutching a confused and frightened Leo tighter. "He said he'd burn it all down if I left him. He said he'd take Leo and run." "That's a lie," Ethan yelled, the injustice of it tearing at his vocal cords. He looked at his son. "Leo, come here. Daddy's here." Leo looked at Ethan, then at the police, then back at his mother. Clara whispered something in the boy's ear, and Leo buried his face in her coat, shrinking away from Ethan. An officer walked out of the house holding a clear evidence bag. Inside was a hard drive. Not the one in Ethan's pocket, but a different one. A decoy. "We found it taped under his desk, ma'am," the officer said to Clara. "Just like you said we might." Ethan stood paralyzed on his own front lawn. The neighbors were watching from their windows. The snow was falling harder now, covering the world in white, but it couldn't cover the stain of what was happening. He looked at Marcus, who had just pulled up in his Blacktown car, watching from a distance like a director observing a scene. Ethan Vance, the architect of systems, realized he was trapped in a loop he couldn't code his way out of. "Mr. Vance," the officer said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Family courtroom 4B didn't smell like justice. It smelled of floor wax, stale coffee, and the damp wool of winter coats. Ethan sat alone at the defendant's table. His public defender, a harried woman named Ms. Reynolds who had met him exactly 15 minutes before the hearing, was shuffling through a stack of papers that looked terrifyingly thin. On the other side of the aisle, Clara sat flanked by 3 attorneys in Italian suits. She wore a modest navy cardigan and minimal makeup, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked like the picture of a grieving wife forced to make a hard choice. The illusion was perfect. "Your Honor," Clara's lead attorney began, his voice smooth and practiced. "We are not asking for these measures lightly, but given Mr. Vance's recent arrest for grand larceny and corporate espionage, coupled with his erratic behavior at the family home, we believe he poses a significant flight risk." "Objection," Ms. Reynolds said, though she didn't stand up. "Mr. Vance has not been convicted of any crime. These are allegations. Allegations supported by substantial digital evidence and witness testimony." The opposing lawyer countered effortlessly. He picked up a document. "Furthermore, we have concerns regarding the child's medical needs. Leo suffers from severe bronchial asthma. On the night of the incident, Mr. Vance was so consumed by his, and I quote the police report, paranoid delusions regarding his wife's whereabouts that he neglected the child's evening nebulizer treatment." Ethan's hands clenched into fists under the table. It was a lie. A precise, surgical lie designed to cut the deepest. He had given Leo the treatment at 7 p.m. exactly. He had logged it in the app they shared. He looked at Clara. She didn't look away this time. Her eyes were wet with tears, but behind the sheen of sadness, there was nothing. No apology. No recognition of the 7 years they had built together. She was just playing her part in a script written by Marcus Hale. "Mr. Vance?" The judge's voice snapped him back. "Do you have anything to say?" "I gave him his medicine," Ethan said, his voice hoarse. "I have the logs on my phone. The phone that is currently in police evidence, Your Honor." Clara's lawyer interjected smoothly. and which our experts believe has been tampered with to hide his illegal activities. The judge sighed, rubbing the bridge of her nose. She looked at Ethan, a man with no job, frozen bank accounts, a pending felony charge, and no address since he'd been barred from the marital home. Temporary sole physical and legal custody is granted to the mother. The judge ruled, the gavel coming down with a dull wooden thud that sounded like a coffin closing. Mr. Vance, you are granted supervised visitation pending the outcome of your criminal trial. However, given the current restraining order requested by the petitioner, you are to remain 500 yards away from Ms. Vance and the child at all times unless at a court-appointed facility. It was over in 20 minutes. Ethan walked out of the courthouse into the biting Boston wind. He had no coat. It was still in the house he couldn't enter. He checked his pockets. A crumpled $20 bill and a set of car keys for his old sedan, which Clara hadn't bothered to claim because it wasn't worth anything. He drove to the outskirts of the city, parking on a ridge that overlooked the skyline. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the buildings where he had spent his life coding, building, and loving. His phone, a burner he'd bought at a gas station, buzzed. It was a notification from the shared banking app, the only one they hadn't cut him off from yet, likely by mistake. Transfer complete, $0. 0 balance. They had drained the joint savings. Every cent intended for Leo's college, for the cabin trip, for retirement. Ethan stared at the city lights flickering on. He could stay and fight. He could scream until someone listened. But he knew the code of this world now. The system was corrupted. You couldn't fix a fatal error while the program was still running. You had to crash it, wipe the drive, and build something new from the darkness up. He started the engine. The heater rattled, blowing lukewarm air against his frozen hands. He didn't look back at the brownstone or the genetics tower or the life that had been stolen. He put the car in gear and turned south, toward the highway, toward Texas, toward silence, toward the only place left where a ghost could build a weapon. The Texas sun hammered down on the limestone hills of Austin, baking the earth into a dusty, cracked mosaic. But 30 feet underground, inside the converted subterranean bunker that served as the headquarters of Titan Security, the air was kept at a crisp, sterile 65 degrees. Ethan Vance walked through the rows of humming server racks, the blue LED status lights reflecting in his eyes. He didn't look like the man who had driven out of Boston in a rusted sedan 4 years ago. The soft edges were gone. He was leaner, his muscles corded from hours of boxing, a habit he picked up to silence the noise in his head. His hair was shorter, peppered with premature gray at the temples, and he wore a simple black t-shirt that cost more than his old car. Traffic is spiking on the East Coast node. Boss. A voice called out. Jax, a 20-year-old hacker Ethan had pulled out of a federal indictment and put on payroll, spun his chair around. Someone is probing the outer perimeter. Looks like a corporate IP scan. Sloppy. Ethan stopped at the main console, a massive wall of monitors displaying data streams from Titan's clients, banks, defense contractors, and major tech firms. Titan Security wasn't just a company. It was the invisible wall that half the Fortune 500 relied on. And nobody knew Ethan Vance was the architect behind it. To the world, the CEO was a shell corporation. Ethan was just a ghost. Trace it, Ethan said, his voice calm, commanding. Already did, Jax grinned. It's a pharmaceutical conglomerate in Boston. Their IT department is trying to stress test their new servers before a big launch. They're looking for vendors. Ethan felt a familiar coldness settle in his chest. He looked up at the center screen. He tapped a key, and the data stream was replaced by a live news feed from CNBC. Breaking. Hale Pharmaceuticals to unveil revolutionary BioCore AI system. On the screen, Marcus Hale stood on a brightly lit stage, looking older but richer. The arrogance was still there, draped in a $4,000 suit. Beside him stood Clara. She was smiling, waving to the crowd, playing the role of the supportive partner perfectly. But the camera resolution was high enough for Ethan to see the strain around her eyes, the way her hand gripped Marcus's arm a little too tightly. And then they brought him out. And the inspiration behind our pediatric care initiative, Marcus announced, gesturing to the wings. Leo walked onto the stage. Ethan's breath hitched. His son was 8 now. He had grown so much. He was wearing a miniature version of Marcus's suit. But he wasn't smiling. Leo looked small, pale, and terrified. He clutched an inhaler in his hand as if it were a lifeline. Clara bent down, whispering something in his ear. A command, not a comfort. And Leo forced a stiff, heartbreaking wave to the cameras. "They're using him as a prop," Ethan whispered. The rage didn't burn hot anymore. It was cold, calculating, and absolute. "That's the ex-wife?" Jax asked, his voice losing its usual playfulness. He knew the history. Everyone in the inner circle did. "That's the target," Ethan corrected. He leaned over the console. The biocore system Marcus was bragging about. Ethan knew the architecture. He recognized the latency patterns in their server ping. They were running his stolen kernel. But they had built on top of it without understanding the foundational load limits. They were trying to run a marathon on broken ankles. "Jax," Ethan said, his eyes never leaving Clara's face on the screen. "You said they are looking for vendors to handle their server load?" "Yeah." "They sent out an RFP, request for proposal, to the top 3 security firms this morning. They're desperate. Their internal team can't handle the traffic they're projecting." "Intercept the RFP," Ethan ordered. "Draft a proposal from Titan. Make it expensive. Make it arrogant. Make it exactly the kind of exclusive protection Marcus thinks he deserves." Jax's fingers flew across the keyboard. "You want to invite them in?" "No," Ethan said, turning away from the screen as the crowd on TV erupted in applause for the family that had stolen his life. "I want to be the one holding the door when the roof collapses." He walked toward the exit of the server room. The 4 years of silence, of building, of waiting in the dark. It was all for this. The code was written. It was time to execute. "Pack a bag, Jax," Ethan called back over his shoulder. "We're going to Boston." The atmosphere inside the executive boardroom of Hale Pharmaceuticals was not just tense. It was toxic. The panoramic windows offered a view of a serene, snowy Boston afternoon. But inside, 20 people were running around like rats on a sinking ship. Red metrics flashed on the giant wall-mounted screens. The BioCore launch was scheduled for 5 p.m. It was currently 2:15 p.m., and the server latency was climbing vertically. "Stop the bleeding," Marcus Hale roared, slamming his fist onto the mahogany table. His face was a mask of sweat and fury. "We have investors flying in from Tokyo and London. If the demo crashes while Leo is on stage, we are finished. Do you understand me? Finished. We can't stabilize it, sir." The chief technology officer stammered, his face pale. "The core kernel. It's rejecting the load. It's like the code is fighting itself. We need more processing power. We need an external dampener." Clara stood by the window, clutching her tablet so hard her knuckles were white. She looked impeccable in her designer suit, but beneath the layers of foundation, she was terrified. If the stock tanked, the auditors would come. If the auditors came, they would find the irregularities in the clinical trials. "What about the security firm?" Clara asked, her voice tight. "Titan Security? They said they could deploy a patch remotely." "They're here," the CTO said, checking his phone. "They just pulled into the garage." Their CEO insisted on overseeing the integration personally due to the sensitivity of the data. "I don't care if the Pope is overseeing it," Marcus snapped, loosening his tie. "Just get them up here and get the system running." A few minutes later, the heavy double doors at the end of the boardroom swung open. The room fell silent. Two men in dark suits entered first, security detail, professional and imposing. Then came Jax, holding a ruggedized laptop, looking sharp but clearly subservient. And then the CEO of Titan Security walked in. He wore a navy three-piece suit that was tailored to perfection, the fabric absorbing the harsh fluorescent lights of the boardroom. He moved with a predator's grace, quiet, confident, and utterly in control. He didn't look at the screens. He didn't look at the panicked engineers. He looked straight at the head of the table. Clara turned from the window. Her eyes landed on the man, and for a second, her brain refused to process the visual data. The tablet slipped from her numb fingers, hitting the carpeted floor with a dull, heavy thud. "Ethan?" she whispered, the name escaping her lips like a prayer for mercy. Marcus froze. He squinted, his arrogance faltering as recognition slowly dawned on him. The man standing before them wasn't the hunched-over, exhausted programmer they had broken 4 years ago. This man stood taller. His jaw was set, his eyes clear and cold as glacial ice. "Hello, Clara," Ethan said. His voice was smooth, deep, and devoid of any emotion. No anger, no love, just business. He turned his gaze to Marcus. "Mr. Hale, I hear you're having some trouble with your stolen architecture." "You?" Marcus stood up, pointing a shaking finger. "Your Titan?" "I am," Ethan replied, walking calmly to the empty seat at the opposite end of the table. He sat down, unbuttoned his jacket, and signaled Jax. Jax connected his laptop to the boardroom's main port. Instantly, the red screens flickered. A massive Titan Security logo appeared, overlaying the chaos. The latency numbers began to drop. The system stabilized. "What are you doing here?" Clara demanded, her voice rising an octave, trembling. "You can't be here. The restraining order expires when invited for business purposes." Ethan cut her off without looking at her. He slid a thick contract across the long table. It stopped precisely in front of Marcus. "Your CTO gave us emergency access privileges 5 minutes ago. We are currently the only thing holding your servers together. If we disconnect, your biocore crashes. Your IPO fails. Your stock becomes worthless by morning." Marcus looked at the contract, then at the stabilizing screens, then back at the man he thought he had destroyed. "This is blackmail. This is consulting," Ethan corrected. "The fee is triple the market rate. And there is an addendum regarding the management of the data logs." "Ethan, please," Clara stepped forward, trying to summon the manipulative charm that had worked so well in the past. "We can talk about this. We're family." "Leo," Ethan's eyes snapped to hers. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Do not," Ethan said softly, "speak his name. Not right now." He tapped the table near the contract. "Sign it, Marcus, or I tell my associate to unplug the patch, and you can explain to your investors why the revolutionary AI you invented just committed suicide." The room was deathly quiet. The only sound was the hum of the servers and the ragged breathing of the man who realized, too late, that he had stolen from the wrong architect. Marcus Hale signed the contract with a pen stroke so aggressive it nearly tore the paper. He shoved the document back across the polished mahogany table toward Ethan, his chest heaving with suppressed rage. "There," Marcus spat. "You have your exorbitant fee. You have your access. Now fix the damn system before the Tokyo markets open." Ethan didn't smile. He simply picked up the contract, checked the signature with a glance, and handed it to the bodyguard behind him. Then he nodded once to Jax. "Execute the patch," Ethan said calmly. Jax typed a short command sequence. On the massive wall screens, the red warning lights vanished instantly. The latency graph flattened into a perfect, stable green line. The room let out a collective breath of oxygen. The engineers slumped in their chairs, relief washing over them. "System optimal," the CTO announced, wiping sweat from his forehead. BioCore is online and stable. We are ready for the demo. Good. Marcus adjusted his tie, regaining his composure. Now get out, Vance. We'll wire the money. I don't want to see your face when I go on stage. We're not done, Ethan said. He didn't move from his chair. Excuse me? Marcus sneered. Part of the contract you just signed, Ethan said, tapping his finger on the table, granted Titan Security full autonomy to perform a deep clean of the database to prevent future crashes. We found the corruption that was causing the lag. What corruption? Clara asked, her voice trembling. She had moved away from the window, sensing the shift in the air. Deleted files, Ethan explained, his voice low and level. Massive clusters of data that were purged aggressively, leaving holes in the code architecture. The AI was trying to reference data that wasn't there. So, to stabilize the system, we restored it. You did what? Marcus's face went drains white. Ethan signaled Jax again. The main screen changed. The BioCore system ready logo disappeared. In its place, a scrolling list of internal logs appeared. They weren't technical logs. They were patient records from the Phase 3 clinical trials. Subject 204, cardiac arrest. Fatal. Subject 219, severe bronchial collapse. Fatal. Subject 301, neurological degradation. Fatal. The room went deathly silent. These were the side effects Marcus and Clara had buried to get FDA approval. These were the bodies they had hidden in the digital basement. Turn it off, Marcus whispered. Then he screamed, turn it off. Cut the feed. The CTO scrambled for his keyboard, but his screen was locked. I can't, sir. I'm locked out. It's admin-level access only. Titan is the admin now, Ethan said. He stood up slowly, buttoning his jacket. He walked around the table until he was standing directly in front of Clara. She was shaking uncontrollably, staring at the screen where the word fatal kept scrolling by like the credits of a horror movie. She knew what this meant. This wasn't just a failed launch. This was fraud. This was manslaughter. This was 20 years in federal prison. Clara, Ethan said. She flinched, looking up at him. Her eyes were wide, filled with a primal panic. The FBI Cyber Division has a secure tip line, Ethan said, checking his watch. In 5 minutes, this entire data packet will be automatically forwarded to their servers. Unless I stop it. Ethan, please. Clara grabbed his lapel, her fingers digging into the fabric. They'll destroy us. You can't do this. I'm the mother of your child. Ethan gently but firmly removed her hand from his suit. He leaned in close, his voice a whisper that only she and Marcus could hear. You stopped being a mother the day you used our son as a bargaining chip for a murderer, Ethan said. He reached into his inside pocket and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a business contract. It was a custody agreement. Sole physical and legal custody to Ethan Vance, he read. Full rights. No visitation without my approval. You sign this and I give you a 10-minute head start before the email goes out. You don't sign it, and the police will be waiting for you in the lobby before the presentation starts. Clara looked at the paper, then at Marcus. Marcus was slumped in his chair, staring at the screen, defeated. He couldn't save her. He couldn't even save himself. He'll go to jail regardless, Ethan said, tilting his head toward Marcus. But you might avoid the conspiracy charges if you cooperate. But first, you give me my son. Clara looked at the pen Ethan held out to her. Her hand shook as she took it. She didn't look at Marcus. She didn't look at the engineers watching in horror. She looked at the door, at her freedom slipping away. She pressed the pen to the paper. I'm sorry, she sobbed, signing her name. Ethan took the paper, checked the signature, and folded it neatly into his pocket. Jax, Ethan said, turning his back on them. Disconnect us. We're done here. Ethan didn't look back as he walked out of the boardroom. Behind him, the sound of weeping had replaced the hum of the servers, a pathetic, jagged noise echoing from a woman who had once commanded rooms with a single glance. He stepped into the elevator, Jax flanking him silently. As the doors slid shut, cutting off the view of the chaotic executive floor, Ethan exhaled. It was a long, slow breath, releasing 4 years of accumulated poison. "Did you send the packet to the bureau?" Ethan asked, watching the floor numbers descend. "I didn't have to," Jax replied, closing his laptop. "The automatic trigger was set for the moment we disconnected. The FBI received the full data dump 30 seconds ago. Financial fraud, reckless endangerment, FDA violations. They're practically printing the indictments as we speak." The elevator dinged at the lobby level. Ethan stepped out onto the polished marble floor just as the revolving doors at the entrance spun frantically. A phalanx of agents in windbreakers emblazoned with FBI stormed in, moving with practiced efficiency. They rushed past Ethan, heading for the elevators he had just vacated. Ethan didn't stop. He didn't watch. He walked out into the crisp Boston air, the sirens of the backup units wailing in the distance, composing a symphony of consequences he had orchestrated but no longer needed to conduct. He got into his car, a black SUV that was sturdy, safe, and built for the long haul. "Where to, boss?" his driver asked. "The airport?" "No," Ethan said, pulling the signed custody order from his pocket. He smoothed the paper with his thumb. "St. Jude's Academy. Take the scenic route." The drive took 40 minutes. Ethan turned on the radio, letting the low hum of the news anchor fill the silence. Breaking news coming out of the financial district. Trading on Hale Pharmaceuticals has been halted following reports of a massive federal raid. CEO Marcus Hale is reportedly in custody, and sources say the investigation extends to several high-ranking board members. Ethan reached out and turned the radio off. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. When they pulled up to the wrought iron gates of St. Jude's, the prestigious boarding school where Clara had stashed Leo to keep him out of the way of her social calendar, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon. The snow on the school grounds glowed with a soft, amber light. Ethan walked into the administrative office. The headmistress looked up, startled by his presence. But before she could protest, Ethan placed the court order on her desk. "I'm here for my son," he said. 5 minutes later, the side door opened. Leo walked out, dragging a small suitcase on wheels. He looked older than 8, his shoulders hunched in a perpetual defensive posture. He wore the school uniform, stiff and formal, and he was clutching his inhaler in his left hand. He stopped when he saw Ethan standing by the car. For a moment, neither of them moved. The 4 years of separation, of brief supervised visits monitored by Clara's hawks, hung between them like a fog. Leo looked at the car, then back at the school as if expecting this to be another trick. Another photo op, another staged moment for his mother's image. Ethan knelt down on the snowy pavement. He didn't care about the suit. He stayed low, meeting his son at eye level. "Hey, buddy," Ethan said softly. Leo blinked. "Is Mom coming?" "No." Ethan shook his head. "Mom isn't coming. It's just me. For good." Leo's grip on the suitcase handle tightened. "For good?" "Yeah. I promised you, didn't I? The cabin. Just us." Leo stared at him, searching his face for any sign of a lie. Slowly, the tension in the boy's small frame began to dissolve. He let go of the suitcase. He took a hesitant step forward, then another until he was running. Ethan caught him, burying his face in the boy's neck, smelling the familiar scent of childhood and winter air. He felt Leo's small arms wrap around his neck, holding on with a desperation that broke Ethan's heart and healed it all at once. "I packed my Lego," Leo whispered into his ear. "Good," Ethan choked out, his eyes burning. "We're going to need it." He stood up, lifting Leo easily into the back seat. He tossed the suitcase in the trunk, a trunk that contained no servers, No hard drives, no secrets. Just clothes and toys. Ethan got into the driver's seat. He looked at the rearview mirror. The prestigious school, the city of Boston, the tower where Marcus Hale was currently being read his rights. It all faded into the background. "Ready?" Ethan asked. "Ready?" Leo said, his voice clear, devoid of the wheeze that usually plagued him when he was stressed. Ethan shifted the car into drive. He didn't check his phone. He didn't check the stock market. For the first time in 4 years, the system was offline. The code was complete. They drove west, chasing the setting sun, leaving the glitches of the past behind them.